Hello everyone. Welcome to my session on second session on SQL Server. This is part of series I'm doing for few of my friends and people who want to learn SQL Server. So let's start. Today what I'm going to cover is, let me go back to agenda. So yeah, today what I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk about system databases and some tables in them. And then I'm going to talk about what are database files and file groups, and then how to create a new database. Is that what I'm going to cover? So let's dive in and let's have a look. So, okay. So there are five system databases. These get created on their own when you install SQL Server. The five are master. The first one I'll talk about. That is the most important database on your SQL Server instance, and that contains all your configuration information about SQL Server, how much memory it is allocated, how much CPU it is allocated, how many people can log in. Sorry, I would say that who all are authorized to log into your SQL Server, and all the other information. So it's one of the most important databases, and if your master database gets corrupted, you cannot start your SQL Server instance. So I will like to emphasize that you have a backup of that, and so that you can restore in case of an emergency. So that's about master. Then there is a database called MSDB, which stores information about the jobs and the backups that we create on SQL Server. So that is what it will have. And then there is a model database that stores uh, basically it serves as template for all the new databases that you create. So I will show you how it works in a bit. And then there is a resource database that was added post SQL 2005, and I remember it not being there earlier, so I've worked so long. So it's added post 2005, and it contains all the system objects, the basically objects that are needed to store data about about your system. For example, you want to check what processes are running and what files are there. So all that information is stored in system tables, and they are in the resource databases. And that is created automatically as part of each databases as sys schema logically. And this database you will not see in your enterprise manager. I will show you where it is when we go into demos. Then the final database I wanted to talk about is the temp. That is the workspace, temporary workspace, where all the temporary objects are created, and also any sorting that you do. And if a query runs out of memory, the SQL Server will start using tempdb. So that is another important database. And that database is recreated each time a SQL instance restarts. So it is recreated, is brand new each time a SQL Server restarts. So you can use the created data on that database to find out when your SQL Server was last restarted. I'll show you how we can do that as well. So let's go ahead. So let's jump to a quick demo of all the tables and all the system databases and the tables that are there. So let's go in here, right? So this is my enterprise manager that I have opened up. So as you can see that these are the four databases that we can see, but we don't see any resource database. So let me show you in my Explorer. So let me get to my Explorer. Just let me minimize this. Yeah, Windows Explorer. So if I go in here, your resource database will be in whatever drive you have stored your install your SQL Server. So for me, I install in D drive under Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server, and your version name and the instance name. So that's what it is. Mine is 2022. So that's why it is 16. And MS SQL, and wait, that's where your resource database will be. So it's called my starts with M. Let's find it. Here it is. So it's called MS SQL system resource. So this is your transaction like file for that. This is the main. So this is where it is uh, in once SQL Server is installed, and it is not shown in the Enterprise Manager. So let's go back to Enterprise Manager, and I will show you how we can find out when SQL Server was restarted using GenDB. So let's see. Right now, they go into properties. It is showing a created date of 10/3, 17/24. So that was yesterday. So when I that was, when I restarted SQL yesterday. So today is 11th. I'm recording the video, so we should get that date when we restart SQL. So let's close this now, and I'll go to the configuration manager and restart SQL Server. So my SQL Server has restarted. So let me refresh so that I can check it. Let's refresh. It's running. So let's go back to our Enterprise Manager. Here it is. And let's reconnect. So let's reconnect from here. Okay. And let's just do a refresh. Right. And go into databases, system databases, and temp. Okay. So now looks like it didn't restart. So let me try again. Give me 1 minute. Okay, so I'm back. Sorry for so the issue was uh, I didn't start my configuration manager as an admin, so that's why it would say it's stopping the services. It didn't stop any services. It didn't do anything. So let's give it a go again. So let's restart it again. So yeah, so now it's starting the service. Last time I didn't get this window. So starting service is done. So let's go into the configuration into our enterprise manager and just let's do a refresh. Let me maximize that. So let's look at databases and system databases, properties, right? So now we see this date as 11/3, that is today's date when I'm recording the video. So that's how you can find out when your SQL Server was restarted. If you don't want to check in error log, this is one way. So now let me show you some tables in the various databases, the system data tables. So let me just open a file. Okay, let's open that. Okay. Right. So there are tables which start with sys. These are tables or what we call metadata tables, which store information about data. So this, like sys users, is a table which stores information about users in a specific database. So this is there in all the databases. So some databases, system tables, you will find in all the databases. So for example, let's have a look. Let's run these two, one on MSDB and one on the master database. I'll run these commands and let's have a look what it gives us back. So, right. So these are storing users in your master database. So these is the other users and logins or sorry, roles in your master database. And this is in your MSDB. So you will find that these are little different like target role, server, SQL agent role. These are not values are not there for master, while this is there for MSDB. So the tables are there, the data that is stored is relevant to that database. So that's how it is. And so let me go back. Okay, right. So next thing I wanted to show was some tables, system tables are very specific to that specific database. So for example, uh, so if I'm on MSDB, I do select star from MS job. We'll get a record. If I say select master, I use master and say run this again, right? So this is not there in master. So we can see that some tables, system tables, might not be there in all the database. There is database specific as well. So right. Okay. And then then I talked about the configuration database, the schema earlier when I was talking about, so which is created from your resource DB. So this is accessible from any database. So this information, for example, I'm talking about three tables I'll talk about. Sys.master files that stores information about all the files of all the databases that you create, user or system databases. And then this is syscall configuration. This is what I talked about, the CPU configuration, memory configuration. That table stores that information, and syslogin stores who can log into your system and as allowed authorized to do that. So let's have a look at them. And so I'm running them right now from master context of master database, as you can see here. Let's execute those and you get back the data. So that's basically about the files. Then if I run it from another context, that's this from MSDB, we will still get the same information because they are in sys schema, and that's in all the databases. So you can see the information. Let's go down. So that's about your configuration, user connections, fill factor. So we'll talk about them all these things in later sessions as well. So and then this is about the logins that are there on the so that's about system databases and some tables that I wanted to talk about. Let's go back to the presentation now. Okay, now there'll be some theory for some time. So let me, sorry. Okay, right. So first, I'll talk about database files. So we have seen system databases. All the databases that you create need to have some files on the OS where your data will be stored, and SQL Server will store data in 8K pages. That's the standard. So remember that. And there are three types of file you can have. The primary data files, that's the first file, which contains information about that database, how many tables are there, what users will log in, and everything, and also information about other files that you will create later. So that's the primary database files. It stores, you can store all your database objects like tables, views, stored procedures, uh, and anything else that you want to store. And then the recommended extension for that is MDF. When you create that file, that's the extension recommended. Then you have the secondary data file. This is optional. If you want to have it, you can have it. If you don't want to have, that's fine. It's usually used to spread data across drives. So, for example, if you have a very big table and you want it to give a faster drive, a separate drive, you could create another HTML file and place that on that drive. So we will look at that as well later, how that can be done. And it is the recommended extension for that is NDF. So let's continue. The third type of file is transaction log files. So SQL Server will write each transaction, what it's doing, into a file that is called transaction log file. And I will talk about transaction logs in the architecture a little later, and maybe later sessions. And then the recommended extension for that is LDF. Each database should at least have two files, uh, the main data file, MDF that we talked about, and the LDF. That is the main minimum you should have to create a database. The file names are of two types. One is the logical file name. That's the name that you give, and T-SQL will reference your files with that name. It is not the actual file on the OS. That's just a file name. So it's called logical file name. Then you have the OS file name, which is the actual file location on your physical drive on your server, right? So that's the two names you can have. Now I will talk about file groups. So this is another important concept. So file groups are logical units to group some files together. So like I talked about earlier, so we have main data file and NDF files. So these NDF files, if you want to group them together, then you can create a file group and put them all together in a file group. So this is basically a logical I will say container, right? There are two types of file groups. Again, primary file group and user-defined file groups. The primary file group is the one which will contain your primary file. That's the first file that we create, the MDF file, which has all information about your database. So that will always go into primary file group. And then you have user-defined file groups, which you can create as and when you want. When the database create, that's what I told, primary file group is automatically created. You don't need to do anything. That's the first one that's created. There is a concept of default file group. A default file group is a file group on which your objects will be created. If you don't specify while creating the object where you want that object to go. So if you don't specify what file group to create, so for example, you have three file groups. And if you don't specify in your create statement which file group you want the database to go to, it will create it on the default database, default file group. So if we don't specify any file group as default, your primary file group will be your default file. Then there is a concept of proportionally filling. So the file in a file group, so are filled proportionally. That means the when the data is being added to these files, SQL Server will look how much empty space each file has. Based on the file on that, the file which has more empty space, it will put more data in that and less data in the other one. For example, if I have two files, one is 1 GB, another one is 2 GB, and if I add 100 GB to the database, 100 GB of data, the first file will get 66 GB and the second one will get 32. So that is the proportional fill algorithm that SQL Server uses. And that is to ensure that all your files in a file group get uh, basically filled around the same time, right? So that's what it is. Log files are filled sequentially. So transaction log files are filled sequentially. So if you have five transaction log files, so first one will be filled, then second one, then third one. So that's how it works. So let's quickly go on to the demos now. So in this my demo now, I will show you how to create files and file groups. So let's go and have a look. Sorry, how to create databases. So let's have a look and the file groups and everything. So let's go from that. So the simplest command to create a database is just to say create my test. So that's it, nothing else to do. So if I do that, don't need to give any file name, nothing. So just do that. So what it does, it takes a copy of the model and whatever settings are there in your model, it will create a database. So let's use this and see what files have been created. And I'll also show you the files that have been created for model. So that's what we have, right? So the size of the one which we created right now database is same as your model database. And the growth is also same. That is, it will copy that also. And the file names it will automatically do. And these file names are a little different because what happened was after this is when I installed my SQL Server, that was the default location for model. But this is different because there is a setting in SQL Server where you can specify where you want your data and log files to go. So I'll show you that one. If I go in here, go into properties, and if I go to database settings. So this is where I have data and log files. This you can change, even your backup files you can change default location. So this is what I have changed. And if you want, you can change it on your server as well, because when you install it, it will be C drive. And if you want your data and logs to be on a different drive, you can change that. So let's cancel out of there, clear out of there, and let's go back to our demo. Right. So next thing, yeah. So I'll now show you how to create a database using your GUI tool, which most of you would like. So here you are in Object Explorer and like create new database, right? And you can give, let's call it SSMS test, right? So you just need to give a database name and it automatically creates the logical file name. That's what I talked about, logical file. And the file type is basically this stores the rows. Rows means the MDF file and log is a transaction log file. Or you can specify what is the initial size you want. So if you say 100 MB or whatever you want, so if I want 100 and this I want 50, and then you want to change your auto grow settings. So what is auto grow? Auto grow settings is whenever your file gets full, how much it is growing each time. That is how you specify in your auto grow settings. And it is important to understand that once when your auto grow is going on, your users might be stalled for some time. So it is very important to know size your database. So it is recommended that you size your database initially properly so that you don't have a lot of auto grows frequently. So there are two settings. You can grow it by in percent or in megabytes. So what is the difference? In percentage, what it will do is whenever the file is full, for example, you started with a 1 GB file and it is full, it will grow it by 10, whatever percent is specified. For example, if I specify 10%, it will grow it by another 100 MB, 100 MB. Yeah, that's, I'm sure my math is correct, hopefully. And then next time it grows, now your file is 1.5 GB, so it will grow based on that. The problem is with this is that it is not recommended because the problem is when your file goes to say 5 GB and now you say 10%. So you are going into 500 megabytes. So that will take a longer time for OS to give it to SQL Server. So that usually it is not recommended. Usually we use a fixed size which you can specify, and by default SQL will say 64. That's the standard setting, and you can change it to whatever you want. And the maximum file size is again, this is the setting which will decide what will be the maximum file size. If you specify that, once that file is full, especially if the main data file, and then users would not be able to use that file. So usually on our systems, we put it at unlimited and set up a alert on your operating system level where you say, okay, my drive is feeling 10% is free, right? So you will have an alert from there, coming from there, or your drive is 10% free. So then you can go and add more files, right? Rather than stopping the operation. So keeping it limited. So that's one way you could do. That's one approach you can take. So I'll leave it as unlimited right now. Okay. And the same things we can do for the other your log file. So yeah, I'll leave that. Then the path. Okay. This is the path where you specify where you want the files to go, and then here you specify the file name, right? So I click the wrong button, right? If I click here, okay. So here then I need to get the file name. So if I say SSMS test dot. So another thing is if I say this not as MDF and I say KDF, I like that. It doesn't stop you from doing that, but let's see what will happen in the OS level. So if I say MSSM test log dot jjj, something like that. And so these are the parameters you need to give in your SSMS to create the database. This is the same thing you can do through a command also, but right now I'm doing through this thing. So let's click on OK. Okay, click on OK. So if you see this error, I'm getting this error while creating database. So if you read it properly, it will say log on database model. So what has happened is I might have used a model database in one of my queries that I was doing earlier, and I didn't switch it back to a master or something. So there's a lock being held on that database. That's why it is not allowing me to create a new database. So this is thing you have to remember when you're using model, you have to come out of it. Otherwise, a lock will be there and you try to create a new database, it will not let you create a new database. So let me kill that and I'll come back and show you how to create that database. Okay, so if you see in this SSMS here, I'm in the model database. So if I switch that to master again, let's do that, right? And let's go back and try and create our database again. So we're here, click on OK here, and click OK, right? So it's created. So if I go into Object of Explorer again and refresh, my database is created. So that's how you can create through SSMS. I wanted to show you what the files will look at the OS level, right? So if I go into D drive and my folder was MSSQL 2020, yeah, SQL 2022. So here, if you see, this is the files I created. Now it doesn't say the operating system cannot recognize these files. There's KDG files or something like that. While for other ones, it will say primary data files and transaction log files, right? So that's so you can rename whatever you want, but it will not be presently a problem at the operating level system. Okay, right. Let's look at the next demo. So next thing I wanted to show you, where is this? I know. Let me go in Object Explorer. So that's where we were. Okay. So we created a database using SSMS. This is a similar thing we can do using your database command. So I'm just giving it where I want it. File name. So that's the minimum you have to give. Two files I talked about, the main data file and log file. That is the minimum you have to give. Create that. And let's do the check the files, right? Okay. So I'll use that and let's go and check the files there. Okay. So it's created those two files, right? And again, these settings, size and everything I didn't give, so it is copied from model. Okay. Now I will talk about the file groups. So let's quickly have a look. There is this, so there is this system table, sys.file groups, which gives you the file group in the current database. So let's have a look at the file groups. So we have only one file group. As I talked, when you create a database, the primary file group will automatically be created. Now let's create a database with two file groups. So now what I'm doing is creating a file group database which has a file group called primary and a file group called secondary and a log file. So let me create this database. Right. So that database is created. Now if I go and check in my this log files, okay, so I have to just switch my context to hgtest. So let me just that. Right. So let's do that. So it's got primary file group and a secondary file group, right? So these are two things I've got. Now, if I go and create a table, so let's say I wanted to create a table, and this is the command to create table. And here I'm not specifying where I want my table to be located, on which file group. So what does it do? Let's quickly run this. And that's created. Now let's see where this table was created. So let's see, this is a query to find out what table is on what file group. So if you see, this is the primary, because right now my primary file group is my default file group. As I didn't specify a name, it went to the primary file group. Now let's create another table. And this time we're going to say created on secondary file group. That's where we specify. So after your table definition, you say created on secondary. Let's run that and see this. Right now you see table 2 is created on my secondary file. Now what we will do is we'll change the default file group to be secondary. That's what we will do. So this is all the command you need to give. You need to alter database and modify the secondary file group. That's where it is to be the default. So that's all command you need to give. Run that and let's check from. I'll just check in sys file groups so that we can see what is the file groups right now. So if you see, the secondary, if you see, is default is for the secondary. That is how we can know which is the default one. So he's saying secondary is the default one. So now let's create a table on this one, right? And again, in this one, I will not specify any file group name. So it's nothing like that. I create that one, and now if you look at this, we'll see the table number 3 has been created on secondary because my default file group is secondary. So that's the concept of file groups and how we place data on different file groups. Next, the final demo I wanted to show you is the proportional fill strategy. How is data filled proportionally across the databases, all across the file groups? Sorry, across the files in a file group. So let's go. Let me open that. Okay. So what we're going to do is we'll create a. Let me start from here. Right. So this is what I'm doing. So I switch to master. I'm going to create a database called proportional fill. This has a file. This is the main data file. Then I have two files, file 1 and file 2. Both the first file is of 1 GB. The second file is of 2 GB. And the first file, obviously, it's created 1 GB, so it has less free space. The second one will have more free space, and I have the log file. So that's all what I'm going to do, right? So I created that database, create that, and now I will modify my file group. I want that second file group, that TF file group, to be the default. So that's what I'm doing here. So I make it as default. Then we are setting the recovery model to simple. I'll talk about different recovery models in the future sessions. So just for time being, let it. Now we are going to put some data, create a table and put some data in this table, right? So let's use this database and create a table. So yeah, right. So let me create the table first. So what table we are creating? We're creating a table which has two columns, just two columns. This one is 7,000. This is again integer columns. So this is approximately each page will be 8K, as I told you. So this will one row will fill the entire page of the database. So it will, not the entire, sorry, database of the table. I'm sorry for that. Slip of tongues and all that happening today. Sorry for that. One row will fill the entire, one row will fill one page of the table. So that's what we have. So let's create that table. Right now, let's go back and look at these database size, right? So this is the command to look at the database size. I'll share the scripts as well later, so you can use them. So let's do that, and I'll just run Excel and copy it there. Right. So this is the data we had. So let me copy this. I've started Excel, so let me copy this. Right. So let me copy it so we can have a look at it later. So right now, if you look, so free space here is 999 MB, which is 1 GB. This has 2 GB space, this file and this file. So another thing I wanted to capture was the file stat. This is a DVCC command that gives you number of extents in the database. So let's have a look at that. And so how much they are filled. So each database is the data is stored in groups of 8K pages, 8K pages. That is called an extent. So that's how data is stored. So this is is telling you about how many extents are there, how many are used. So let's copy that as well. Okay, so let's keep it. Okay, let me do one thing. I'll just put it in another workbook so that it's easier. Then we can delete it from here. Let's go back. So now what we are doing is we are putting, let's go next here. So we are, each row is 8K and we'll insert 3 GB of data. So we'll insert 384,000 rows. So let me run that command. So that will be 3 GB of data. Let's quickly, that takes around 35 seconds. Yeah, so it took around 47 seconds. I was wrong. So it took a little longer now. So it's done. So now let's go back and look at the sizes, right? Let's have a look. Let's run this one. Right now, let's copy this so we can compare with earlier. Let's go to Excel. So let's look at this now. So if you look at this, we had free space of 1 GB here and 2 GB here. So it didn't do, so what did it do? So it pulled 1 GB data here and 2 GB data here based on how much they were uh, free, how much free space each file had. So it evenly distributed the data across the two files. So now the free space on each one is is almost same. So that's how SQL Server will proportionally fill the data based on your free size. So that's how it is. So let's look at the extent also if we want to. So we can have a look at that as well. We'll see. I'll copy that. Right, and put it here. So if you look at these two files, initially they both had only one used extent, and the free. So now they all the number of used extents is almost there. So if you minus these two, the number of used extents is almost zero in both of them because it is proportionally filled the data. This is what we can make out from here as well. So we added to 3 GB. So it didn't add all the 3 GB to first file and like that and let it grow auto grow it. But so it did full 1 GB in the second file and 2 GB in the first file because we had more space there. So that's all for today. And if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat window, in the group chat that we have going. And yeah, I'll catch you next week then. Thank you.